Sometimes you just need to take the slips out and bowl defensively. And you also need to be careful with your computer's defense as well. If you need a VPN, go Nord. NordVPN.com/Kimber to get a 2-year contract with a discount, plus 4 extra months and gifts in some markets. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the show notes. So put in some dot balls and turn them into maidens via NordVPN.com/Kimber. Everyone, and welcome to the Scoreboard. I'm Jared Kimber. This game was over the moment India bowled a single delivery of spin. Forget intent and tosses, everything else, rest. England do not bowl or play spill all that well. And this is India in Guyana. It took Akshar Patel 1 ball. And if you go back, of course, India showed great intent from the start. It was interesting that England didn't really try to swing the ball all that much. There were a few times, though, to be fair to England, when the ball was popping up in the air, and some of those could have gone to hand, which would have changed this game quite dramatically. And Virat Kohli continued his woes. Eventually, England worked out that if you just bowled it on a very good length towards the stumps, that was better than bowling it away from the stumps. And there were certainly some balls that kept incredibly low. But Rohit Sharma seemed to understand that one end was a little bit easier to bat on than the other quite quickly. And so he put a lot of pressure back on England. Also, does this now mean that Sky is good against teams in World Cups that are important? We'll have to think about that one for another day. Hardik could hit again is something else that was quite interesting. And then India brought in Jadeja earlier. So England stole more overs with Livingston. The issue with that is always the same. Once you do that, it really means that anyone can bowl spin on this wicket if Livingston is bowling at the death. But the other thing that was really noticeable, of course, is what I talked about before, is just how many wickets came at one end, how many runs came at the other. But England came out and they got a good start. They actually scored quite normally off a Jasprit Bumrah over. And then Arshdeep went for 3 boundaries on this wicket, which, to be honest, shouldn't be allowed. And that's when Akshar Patel came on. Game over, because straight after that, Bumrah bowled another over, he took a wicket, and then Akshar took another one. That meant that in 3 overs, England had about, a 30% chance of winning, and then suddenly they were as likely to win that game as I was to win the next Olympic high jump gold medal in women's event. Kuldeep had not actually bowled by this stage. England had already lost the game, and Kuldeep had not bowled a delivery. That was it. They never got back into this game at all. England did not choke. They were just simply not as good as India, especially in these conditions, especially in this game. India probably got a few more than par, but their bowlers made it look like they got 1,000 more than par. India were better, and now we have a voodoo off in the World Cup final between 2 teams that have a lot of ghosts they both need to slaughter. All right, on to the scoreboard. If you want to ask super chats, questions, super chats is the best way to go. But let us get through the scoreboard first. There we have it. Barbados. So we had a dreadful wicket in Trinidad that shouldn't have been allowed for a semi-final. We had a typical Guyanese wicket, although more from one end than the other, if we're being honest, there. And Barbados. Both teams have a fairly even chance in that last one with those conditions, although you probably favor India a little bit more just based on conditions alone. And let's have a look at what India did. You see, England kept them to a decent enough start. They then got the wicket, but by this stage, I think it really is between overs 7 and 8 where India put a lot of pressure back on England. And we've been seeing this a lot in this tournament of them, even on wickets that aren't particularly good for batting, just putting extra pressure on and getting themselves in a really good position. But England did actually fought back again, especially Adil Rashid, who bowled really well, and Liam Livingstone. This is Chris Jordan bowling half volleys. It hasn't cost them the game because they've obviously lost by a long way. It did cost them a real moment. And you could see that after that, there was a bit of a collapse, but England couldn't capitalize on it because of this. And they still got enough runs towards the end. So I had the pitch of I thought 165 was a perfectly acceptable score. They went a little bit past that. Maybe 155 was par on this pitch. Either way, they went beyond it. This is the two ends, the media center ends, which I think the Chris Jordan over came at this end, by the way, if I'm not mistaken, which I think tells you even more about the fact that how different these two ends were. In the end, it was only a 1-run difference per over, but that was mostly because of the Chris Jordan over. But look at the wickets. That is a huge difference there. But let's get to the batters. Rohit Sharma, we talked about it before. His ability to play on bad wickets in general, I think, is one of his best skills. We've seen that as India juiced up their test wickets for years, and he looked like the guy who could handle it. Fantastic innings. Never let England feel comfortable. Kept looking. You know, there's a couple of times where he just tried to slog one across the line, realized that he was at the wrong end, playing the wrong kind of shot, and then he went back to much better shots. I thought it was excellent. And Sky, not quite as fast as Rohit, but there was always the threat he was going to flip one over his shoulder, right? Whether it be the sweep or getting inside the line or the scoop or whatever that may be. And it really knocked England around. And then these three guys are really important as well. You got Akshar Patel coming in for 10 runs off 6 balls. Jadeja, 17 runs off 9 balls. And Hardik Pandya, 23 runs off 13. You know, this is a very, very good batting. If you go back to the sort of Afghanistan, have 2 guys who can bat properly and then hope a couple of guys can whack a couple of boundaries for you at the end. Absolutely perfect. You can see here there's a couple of edges with some of those shots. Lots of balls sort of struck into the outfield over here, looking for a couple. These are the ones, I think maybe even all 4 of these were the ones that were chipped over the fielder. And honestly, he would have scored a lot quicker. He probably batted when the outfield was at its slowest. So at least 2 4s, maybe 3 4s, he would have got more. This is the bowlers. Jofra Archer went at 8 runs and over, and Reece Topley's under him. The 2 seamers that struggled, you know, a lot. You've got here, Jordan was pretty much all 1 over. Sam Curran, who I thought started bowling really well on this wicket and then kind of lost what he was trying to do on it. But the 2 spinners both going at a run a ball. For me, this was the death knell of England, or at the very least, they had so much pressure back on India's seamers, and that's always going to be hard to do with Bumrah. You can see he's not a regular wicket taker, Livingston, but more importantly, he's not usually very economical when he doesn't take wickets, right? That would be my issue today, that he managed to be economical without taking wickets, which would have terrified me if I was an England player. Then they came out to bat. Arshdeep held firm. They got the 8 runs off the Bumrah over, and then Arshdeep had another moment. They've decided on Arshdeep over Siraj. I don't think that's massively a mistake, although I think on this particular wicket, I definitely would have had Siraj. Just because, well, even more so now that I've seen the wicket, but I just think he keeps the stumps in play and hits the wicket a little bit harder and would have got some more inconsistent bounce, which is something that you want to do there. And then there's the wicket, and just look at the steady flow of wickets that they get afterwards, right? You know, from over 4 to 11, it's absolutely gone. And then a couple of big hits from Jofra is all we have towards the end. And I just think if you're coming into a World Cup semi-final and Jofra Archer has scored 21, and you're probably not going to win too many games. Oh, press the wrong button. And just to get on to the Indian bowlers here, Hardik Pandya took some tap. It's from 1 over. No one cares. Arshdeep, a little bit more. Someone cares. Jadeja, considering the wicket, I actually thought England played him okay. And I'm only comparing that to the other 2 spinners. Kuldeep Yadav came on when the game was over and bowled beautifully. And Akshar Patel is the reason the game was over. And Jasprit Bumrah, after that first over that went for, 8 runs, although it might have been 7 off the bat, was it? It was certainly 8 runs anyway. He went for a couple more runs after that. Best true economy in a World Cup campaign, minimum 100 balls. Incredible to think that Wayne Parnell, Daniel Vettori and Sunil Narine are ahead of this. Also, West Indies didn't win that year, by the way. We talked about Vettori before, of the incredible one. And Wayne Parnell, who's now famous for making TikToks. Jasprit Bumrah, 2.86 runs and over, better than what you would expect. Incredible, incredible effort. I wish I had more to analyze, but I'm not sure what we would be analyzing here. This game was over so quickly that it is very, very hard for us to really go into any depth of what happened. We'll probably do a main video over on the other channel. We've got another video on tosses, which doesn't sound great, but is kind of cool, which will come up also. So stand by for that. But what I'll do now is I'll take a quick ad break here, and then we'll get through some of the questions on the chat. I'm Jared Kimber, and this is the Scoreboard. I have a book out with Abhishek Mukherjee, and it is called Overthrowing Cricket's Empire. And it's about the stories of how each team beat England for the first time. We go all the way back to the demon Fred Spofforth getting annoyed at W.G. Grace for acting a little bit like Alex Carey. And then we come all the way to present times with Rashid Khan's England's redemption. We cover every single team to beat England in a major international, but we also talk about the incredible stories like the barefoot basher from Fiji that almost played for New Zealand. In fact, this book is full of tales like that. Like how Pakistan lost a top batter after he was on the run from an angry husband of a movie star he was having an affair with. And also how one future captain of his nation realised he might have to go out and bat at Lords and that he didn't own his own pads. Cricket was used as a tool by the Empire, but what happens when those nations grow up and get good at it? Find Overthrowing Cricket's Empire on Amazon today. All right, welcome back. Okay, I've got a couple of questions. I'll have another ad in a little while so I can get to a couple more questions as well. But let's get to the first questions. Will says, India versus South Africa, the ultimate joker's battle. Now that he paid £2 to make that gag. No, I mean, it's a fantastically interesting game, right? Because you do have two sides who have this incredible history. In India's case, it's very, very recent. In South Africa's case, obviously, it goes back to 1992. And someone's going to end that. And so from that point of view, it's really great. It's going to be annoying for the other team. I mean, maybe in some cases, this is the first time South Africa's made a final of a major tournament. So maybe they've already broken their hoodoo. But it's going to be annoying from the other team, right, to get that close and not get there. But we're going to get one team over it. And you know, from a narrative point of view, I'm kind of done with both of them, if you know what I mean. Like, I thought that both teams had a fairly good chance of winning this tournament coming in. I didn't think India deserved to be outright favourite from the beginning. But they certainly have played the most consistent and best cricket all the way through. South Africa's tournament has been wild. It really has. It's the most wild, unbeaten run I've ever seen in a World Cup, I think. Maybe since Australia in 2003. In fact, I think this is much more wild. But yeah, so it's going to be a fascinating final. Zero Gravity says, I know toss played a great factor, but India really batted well to keep the 8 runs per over in check. I'm happy. Archer batted like nothing to lose. I feel that England's top order should have also done that. I don't think the toss was that big a factor at all. India were going to bat first anyway, and England were going to bowl first anyway. So in that case, I don't think the toss was at all. And if anything, it shows the flexibility of thought that England would definitely always have bowled first, whereas India were willing to go, oh, with the conditions, we can make a slight change. And it's one problem with England's method, that, you know, that they always try and win the toss and chase, which is why we've got that video coming out in a couple of days. But yeah, so I don't think it was the toss. I think, as I said at the start, India probably got anywhere between 5 and 15 runs more than par on a wicket that suited their bowlers more. So if you then factor that in, you're probably at 20 to 25 runs more than par. What was going to happen that would have helped England would have been, you know, doing a Salt thing. And that was one, if I had one issue, I kind of felt that a lot of it rested on Salt. I think what you saw is he felt uncomfortable because of the ball skidding low, would be my guess. But yeah, it's funny you say that. They hit 3 fours in the third over. So they were going for it. It's just that once the spin came on, it fell apart, right? It's not the first time we've seen that. Miko says, consecutively. Oh, I think the underrated part of this team is the all-rounders. Hardik Jadeja might be 2 of the best all-rounders in the world, with Akshar not far behind. Any other team would lavish one. I've been saying this for ages. People keep saying to me, oh, you know, you can't play both of them. I'm like, well, you can. And if you go back, I kept saying that I was worried about Hardik's form, but I'm not worried about Hardik. He's still not at best form, if we're being honest. But he's found ways to be really, really handy for India at certain times in this. And that innings was a really important one again. You look at the difference of Hardik, Akshar, and Jadeja, comparing that to Sam Curran and Liam Livingstone. Livingstone's had a great game with the ball in this one, but he's unbowlable a lot of the time. You look at their batting, and they're number 6 and 7, right? Again, so Chris Jordan plays as their separate all-rounder. And Chris Jordan's a fine hitter if he comes in the last, 10 or 12 balls of the innings. You don't really want him in at number 8 earlier. Not that today's a bad example. So, yeah, it's why India wanted the long batting lineup, allows their batters to go really, really hard. Mukesh says, I think England lost the tournament from a strategic point of view. What do you think? What did they do wrong strategically today? I think maybe they should have tried to get Topley to swing the ball a bit more rather than go cross seam. Having said that, there was a lot of balls chipped up in the air, balls that could have been caught. So I'm not sure they made a mistake there. What's their next strategic mistake? I actually thought they did really well with getting that extra Livingstone over at the end. Chris Jordan was a failure to execute. I think he came on to bowl Yorkers at a time they didn't need Yorkers and then didn't nail the Yorker. What else do we have strategically? Can't think of anything else that much strategically that they got wrong. They don't have a lot of good spinners, and they don't play spin very well. That's probably what they got wrong. Puffy says, some England batters lack batting awareness. Butler should never reverse sweeping Akshar's first ball. Dude, they've been doing this for years, and they've won a 50-over World Cup and a 20-over World Cup, and they got much better at Test cricket playing all this sort of stuff. You can't have a go at them when it doesn't work because of the amount of times it has worked, right? So no, I don't have any issue with that. The issue is that they haven't been playing spin very good for a long period of time. That's the issue. If anything, Butler knew that coming in. That was always going to be a bigger problem. Vandana says, what is the psychological behind teams like India and South Africa choking? Is it the pressure to win due to teams losing over and over again? Does Australia still give a fuck about white ball cricket? Like, care a fair bit. They've won a few things recently. I don't think those teams do choke, Vandana. And if you go back to my work, I think you'll see I've covered this many, many times before. India, I think, kept getting themselves into the wrong mindset and quite often had a batting lineup that didn't allow their batters to go fully at it. And because of that, they got themselves caught. Their bowlers were quite often defensive bowlers as well. So they were matching batters who were batting at par or just above par with defensive bowlers, which is not a good thing against very good teams at the end of tournaments, especially teams who are throwing it all at them. South Africa's problem has been for a long time that, again, they bat a little bit too defensively in tournaments. I've done whole videos on both of these sides if you want to go back and have a look at it. But they bat too defensively in tournaments. They lose a lot of their edge. Of recent times, with South Africa, it's been more to do with the fact that they have a weak number 7 position. And so they hold back their strength, which is Klaasen, Miller, now Stubbs, if you want. And they don't maximize those batters. But they're trying to match that up with 5 genuine strike bowlers. And so it's a risk, but it can put them in a good position. So their 5 best bowlers, they all interchange quite well, whether they pick the extra seamer or the extra spinner or however that works. So I think there's a lot of good options from that point of view. So the psychology of it, there are elements of the psychology. Like, for instance, I think India definitely, when they got to World Cups, especially World Cups in good time zones, really let the pressure of the Indian public get to them. And I think that made them defensive when they already had issues that were going to force them towards being defensive. With South Africa, I think I've gone through the entire history of it. I really think most of the times they've had a kink in their game and the opposition has found that kink at the wrong time. You see it again and again and again. Samit says, India choking or South Africa choking, which is funnier? I mean, if you're talking about what's funniest to me, it would have to be India failing, right? Because if India failed to win this World Cup against South Africa, Like you lose to Australia and everyone sort of shrugs their shoulders and goes, okay, well, it's Australia and they win things. You lose to England and you're like, well, they're now the dual World Cup winning title holders, right? You lose to Pakistan and you're like, well, Pakistan's, bound to have a day. Even when they lost to Sri Lanka many, many moons back, that was a Sri Lankan team that was just so great and should have won a lot more than it did. You lose to South Africa, and from a narrative perspective, right, there's got to be an element of, wait, what now? So yeah, I do think that would be an issue. That would be the funnier issue, I should say. And not that, I mean, they're both funny. That's why it's kind of cool. One team's going to stop the problem, and one team is going to add to the problem. So in that way, I suppose they're both really funny. Zero says, do you think Kohli should be dropped? No. I'm a big fan of Kohli, but I feel he should voluntarily step down and give way to Samson in the final. Samson can open batting and have more experience than Jaiswal. So in the finals, they're going to be facing Marco Janssen, who, when he's not bowling absolute filth, is bowling absolute filth, but really good filth. They're going to be facing Kagisa Rabada, who's suddenly found his form and his length and everything else, although it was a helpful wicket the other day, but he nailed it. And Anrek Nokia, who's been one of the bowlers of the tournament. From a seam perspective, all due respect to Sanju Samson, but how do you think Sanju Samson is going to play seam bowling of that quality better than Virat Kohli? Right? If you're talking about form, then there's not much I can do with that, because for all we know, Samson's in worse form and Kohli's about to hit form, because we don't know how form really works, and neither does anyone else. But if you're talking about matchups, you've got three incredible seam bowlers, and maybe Otniel Bartman as well, right? Who's not at their level of the other guys, but pretty fantastic himself. Suddenly you've got all these different seam bowlers coming in and bowling in that kind of way, and you're going to drop your guy who's better against seam for another guy who's better against spin. It doesn't, well, to me, that wouldn't make any sense at all. But also, they have made this decision to go with Kohli. It's a hell of, think about this. If they drop Kohli and they lose that game, what's the story going to be, Zero? Right? And it may not even make that much of a difference. But if I was going in now, if Jaiswal, I would have no problem. I probably wouldn't have had Kohli in my side for this tournament, right? Once Rohit was captain, Kohli's the person I probably would have moved aside. But I don't think it makes a lot of sense. He doesn't look out of form to me. He looks like he's not making runs. And there's a big difference between those two things. If he looked out of form, like he wasn't about to make a run, then yeah, I might be more on your side. But he just looks like he's not making runs. And, what did Greg Chappell once say? I'm not out of form. I just keep making ducks. I think that's what he said. There's a lot of ducks he made in a row. We'll have another quick break here. And then after the break, we will come back with more of your questions on the scoreboard with Jared Kimber. If you need your pitch changed, well, NordVPN can doctor any surface to a new location so that your IP address is set for you to win. Want to watch a game on a free stream in another hemisphere? Give NordVPN the ball. Or if you just want to watch a clip on social media that a cricket board won't allow, promote NordVPN to pinch hit. So if you need a VPN, go Nord. Use nordvpn.com/Kimber to get a 2-year contract with a discount, plus 4 extra months and gifts in some markets. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the show notes. Protect your computer like a bowler protects the boundaries in the death overs with nordvpn.com/Kimber today. All right, welcome back. Just realized I missed a whole bunch of questions. Anyway, we've got a few more. Let's have a look. All right. Yeah, I've got a couple more. I think, have I got a couple more? Super chats as well. I do. That's what confused me. All right, that's fine. Where are we at? ABCD says, what does Bumrah need to do to be among the bowling greats like Stain McGrath was him? Well, he is already. I mean, white ball, he's there. He has to take 200 wickets in Test cricket. That's the cutoff. That's the difference between someone who's very good for a short period of time, and if you've done it for 200 wickets, then that's done. But yeah, he's certainly the best 3-format bowler we've ever had. So he'd be just ahead of Dale Steyn for that at the moment. Dale Steyn, obviously a test bowler over a longer period of time. So, and Dale Steyn was probably an underrated white ball bowler, all things considered, but I don't think he was on Jasprit Bumrah's class, obviously. And Jasprit Bumrah is great in both of those formats of white ball. But yeah, it's the 200 wickets in Test cricket thing, I think, is a pretty big marker for greatness in Test cricket. Although, who knows how many bowls will do that into the future. Roll says, do you think England went too defensive with Rashid in the middle overs? I thought they should have tried something to break the Rohit-Sky partnership. No, I think they were. What you saw was quite often what Rashid does. He bowls dry to try and get you to take on that big chance. I also think that there was a couple of times when the ball was a little bit wet. So there was one over where he was bowling when it was actually raining. And so they lost an over of him ripping the ball. But yeah, look, I get your general point there. But I mean, it's not why they lost this game. He bowled quite well. You got to remember that the way that they think about things as a team is very, very different. They were still thinking that they could chase a total like this on this kind of wicket at that stage, whereas you're thinking about it from a different kind of team's perspective, right? So they're very different from that point of view. Ali sent a super chat through, but I can't see a question, so Amuku might have to find one if there is one later on. But I couldn't find one in there, Ali. But thank you for your super chat. Pancake says, first time any team is going to win the World Cup unbeaten. Yeah, so of course that would happen this time. I bet every time a team lost in this World Cup, so a major team I thought could win, even some of the smaller teams. So I had a bet on Sri Lanka, New Zealand, Australia, England. Those are the four teams. And which is a pain because I always thought South Africa was a big chance. I just figured South Africa would eventually lose a game. That would change their odds and I'd be able to get something a little bit better on them. And it never happened. And so, yeah, it is. I find that really interesting as well. I mean, in South Africa's case, as I said before, how they ever remained unbeaten is one of the biggest mysteries of someone who's covered every ball of this tournament. And thanks to MV Play, like every ball like twice. India, a little bit less so. But India have got themselves into, a couple of holes as well. So I think that's really interesting. And it's not a normal thing. One team may get to the final unbeaten would be surprising to me. Two is ridiculous. Nikhil says, RCB want to hire you. They did that once. Didn't last all that long. Samit says, does India need a World Cup to cement themselves as the best team in the past decade? Also, should South Africa consider Kotsia over Bartman? Oh, okay. Can they really cement themselves as the best team in the last decade with Australia winning the World Test Championship, the 20 over World Cup and the 50 over World Cup? Would one win bring India back? Probably not at this point. But they need it, regardless of that, to me. So, yeah, they need it. The highest run chase at this venue was 130 by the West Indies, so I was confident with India's bowling attack, especially with Kuldeep and Akshar. That's international chase, though, isn't it? I'm sure I've seen bigger chases than that in the CPL. It wasn't playing as much like a normal Guyana wicket, though. As I said before, it kind of played like a Guyana wicket from one end and less so from the other end. Like I've seen Guyana wickets where what Jofra was doing at the end would have been impossible, right? Like to have someone sort of just swinging through the line and hitting sixes. So that's why I thought it was 155. On this one, but you've also got to factor in the batting power of England and their ability to score very, very quickly. So, 3 overs have seemed, let's say Bumrah still goes for 7. It's every possibility that Arshdeep's first over goes for 15 and his second over or Hardik's first over goes for 25. Suddenly the score that they got wasn't a big issue. I still thought England had a chance, but I just wanted to see how they face spin. And after one ball, I was like, they no longer have any single chance. Ankush says, any changes playing 11 of either team? Bartman instead of Shami. Someone said Kotsia, didn't they? Have I missed that question? Oh, that was the last one from Samit. So I'll answer both of these sort of linked to each other. I don't see how Kotsia plays because he bowls the same time in the innings as Anrik Nortje. Whereas Bartman is more of a new ball bowler. And it gives them a little bit more flexibility that way. So I think they would struggle to bowl Nortje and Kotsia in the same team. Unless it's another wicket like Trinidad, where they just, although the spinners help in Trinidad, but unless it's another wicket where they just think whacking it into the middle of the pitch will help them. And then they might go with that. But I would assume And let's get to the next question. Oh, no, that's the wrong one. I wanted this guy. Ankush. Bartman instead of Shamsi is the change I would expect. The reason I would expect it is, and I haven't looked up Shamsi's record versus India, but he didn't work particularly well in the IPL, and I think he might bowl a little bit too slow against Indian batters. That also depends on the wicket, though. If the wicket is absolutely ragging, then I think they're kind of silly to not try him in there. But if they don't think it's going to rag and it's just going to keep a little bit lower and everything else, then Bartman might be the better option in that case, which is great. They're in a position where they have the flexibility to be able to do that. So let's have a look. 12 matches versus India, 7 wickets, an average of 45 at 8.5 runs and over. So all those numbers way worse than his normal numbers. And in India, 7 matches for 3 wickets, average of 57, 8.69. So even on spinning wickets, that hasn't been all that much difference for Shamsi. I don't know what they're going to do, and I haven't chatted to that team at all, but I could see why they might do that. Eddie says, what's going wrong with Virat? He's not making runs. It's a short T20 tournament, and he's been on some of the worst wickets of all time, and he hasn't made any runs. He's fine. Love says, could someone please drop Dubé? Why? Why would you want Dubé dropped at this point? Look, Dubé could be really, really important again in the next game. If they think South Africa is going to drop a spinner, they might drop Dubé then, just because the matchups don't make as much sense. We've seen at times, even when Dubé out of form, teams are still so scared of bowling spinners to him. Remember, Australia didn't bowl Maxwell. That was a big part of why they didn't do it, other than the fact that they read the wicket that way. There is a reason why Dubé is there, and I thought they used him perfectly today. They went, oh, okay, there's probably not going to be any more spin bowled, so let's take Dubé out here. And they were wrong in that case. Absolutely fine. No one has any issues with that. He's made, what, did he make a golden duck today? Like, that's not bad form, mate. That's just the thing that happens to people first ball. Harshit says, do you think this brand of cricket where chasing is safe is a result of flat track bullying and franchise cricket bullshit? Well, franchise, no. Was it just a strategic move based on limited resources? There's a video coming out on this on the main channel tomorrow, Harshit. Everyone does it. I think since the start of 2016, I think that's the right date. The only team, there's only like one team who decides to bat first more than 35% of the time, and that's Afghanistan in all world cricket. This isn't franchise stuff. It's very hard to explain it on this particular video, but if you go and have a look at that video, you'll understand that I don't agree with it, and I certainly don't agree with the way that England specifically do it, because if the other opposition know what you're going to do every time, they can upset you. And also, like, how are you getting any better when you have to bat first? I don't think it had anything to do with the result today, though, because I don't think England would have handled the spin particularly well if they were batting first either. Aditya says, were these the most boring semi-finals ever? No, I'd have to have a look. It's been a pretty exciting tournament. Can we really complain that we've had a couple of games that are not quite as exciting? Probably not. We probably will anyway. All right, I am done on the scoreboard for today. We'll certainly do a scoreboard after the final, and we'll put it on both channels again. But if you only follow one of my channels, find the other one and do that as well. But it's okay if you're like, oh, Jared, we're just getting started and now we're leaving, because I'm now going to head over to Cricket 8, and me and Mega are going to do another show over there. So I've got more. Oh, wait. Cheeky at the end. Agagra says, it's funny that England played the semi-final after defeating just one non-associate team in the tournament. I feel we all got pranked. Yeah, I mean, I think Australia will be looking back at it going, we might have played that game a little bit better than England did. I don't think England really ever hit form in this tournament. They played really, really great against the 2 associate teams. They lost to South Africa. I thought they played good against West Indies, but I didn't think they were incredible. So I think that's fair. That's a World Cup though, mate. Sometimes these things happen. Kenya made a semi-final once. Afghanistan just made a semi-final with essentially 2 opening batters and 2 opening bowlers for most of the tournament. Anyway, that's me. If you want to find me again, go over to the Cricket 8 channel and I'll be there in a few shakes of a lamb's tail. I'm Jared Kimber. This is the Scoreboard and we'll be back again very soon everywhere. And we'll certainly here and there. I'll be back everywhere. I'm always everywhere. Thanks to the kind folks at FlexiSpot for looking after my office and my butt by sending me their E7 Pro desks that save your favorite desk heights at a touch of a button. You don't have to crank anything. This thing just finds the height that you like and you can work. And their BS12 Pro chair that supports my posterior while I'm recording, well, this ad and all my shows. If you need great desks, especially ones that change heights or the best quality chairs, head on over to FlexiSpot today.